Louisiana Republican Congressman Mike Johnson is with me. Good evening. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, Poppy. Great to be with you.
Let me just get your reaction to something the president just said literally a few moments ago on Air Force One, reacting to Iraq's parliament voting to basically expel, to try to push out all U.S. troops from the ground in Iraq. The president just said on Air Force One, quote, "If they do ask us to leave, we will charge them with sanctions like they've never seen before. Quote, it'll make Iranian sanctions look somewhat tame." Is that a good idea?
We are awaiting a briefing to Congress when we get back, and we're looking forward to getting all the information. Of course, the president is privy to all the intel that we as members of the House don't have yet. He has the full scope, the full picture. Look, I'm not sure exactly what's going to develop with that. We saw and watched with interest what Iraq did today, and those developments are important. We have to be very careful about our actions going forward because we don't want to further destabilize that region. These are
sanctioning Iraq further would slapping sanctions potentially harsher than on Iran on Iraq, would that, in your assessment, further destabilize the region?
Well, it depends on what those sanctions are and how they're administered. I mean, there's a lot of factors that we don't have, your viewing audience doesn't have tonight, and that, frankly, we won't until we get back to Washington and get these intel briefings. So I'm looking forward to that. I know the other members of Congress are as well. In the meantime, you know, I trust that the president is doing the right thing.
Congressman, do you believe, as the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo has argued, that the world is safer today because Qasem Soleimani has been taken out?
I heard that statement, and I agree with it. Look, Soleimani was a known terrorist, a murderer. He killed thousands of people, hundreds of Americans. And when the Secretary of State and our intel says that he had further attacks planned on Americans and others, I think that it's beyond dispute that we are a safer world without him in that position. Now, of course, there are consequences. Of course, there's fallout. We'll deal with that as it occurs. But I think a strong America is good for the whole world, and we have shown that we're strong on this issue. And I think that's welcomed by most Americans.
I ask you because history has shown us that often when you take out the head of a terrorist organization, that the threat does not go away. And we now have the State Department that has ordered all Americans to leave Iraq immediately. We have thousands of additional U.S. service members going to the region after Soleimani was taken out. And you have DHS bracing America for the very real likelihood of a cyber attack from Iran. So how is that a safer world this Sunday night as you and I are talking? How is it safer in this moment with those responses?
Iran has been effectively on the attack against the U.S. for 40 years. They've been chanting death to America in the streets. The interesting development there, though, is that the people are now turning against that. There's been a great tide, an uprising that I think has been welcomed in the West, that we've seen that develop. And I think there's a lot of instability there on the ground. You know, we've always been at odds with Iran. We always have been. It's always, every briefing we get from the Pentagon, from top military officials to Congress, they list Iran in the top 2 or 3 threats of things that we have to watch for. So this is nothing new. And taking out Soleimani, because we had the intel, apparently, that showed that he was plotting even further worse attacks against innocent people and American citizens. Look, I take the Secretary of State, the President, at their word. I think it was a necessary action. And, of course, we have to deal with the fallout from that action. We'll see what happens.
The president, as I'm sure you saw overnight, tweeted that if Iran strikes any Americans or American assets, the U.S. has, quote, targeted 52 Iranian sites, some at a very high level and important to Iran and Iranian culture. Here's how Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen responded to that. Listen.
You just heard the president this morning talk about targeting Iranian sites, including cultural sites, which is, in fact, a war crime if the president was to carry that out.
Do you agree with him that it would be a war crime? It certainly would be a violation of the UN Resolution 2347 that the U.S. and the whole Security Council agreed to, 2 years ago. Would it be a war crime?
I agree with what Secretary of State Pompeo said this morning very clearly on the morning talk shows. He said, we are going to follow the law. We'll follow international law and all of these.
I saw all of those interviews that he did, but I'm just asking you, do you believe that as a violation of that UN resolution, it would be a war crime?
Look, I don't know. I think it depends on the circumstances. It depends on which sites. It depends on, the conditions. And I don't think that we can make that call as a hypothetical. I think it really is a hypothetical question about a hypothetical set of facts that we don't know. I do take great solace in what the Secretary of State says. Our State Department is committed to following the law. I think we will.
I don't know how hypothetical it is, given that it is a statement from the president. But let's move on to the other development, which is what's going to happen in the Senate this week. Is there going to be an impeachment trial of the president? Is Pelosi going to hold on to the articles? Given the developments in Iran, do you believe the Senate should hold an impeachment trial for the president right now?
I do. I agree with many of the sentiments that have been said on your program this evening. I've been watching what's said. These are consequential times. These are delicate times. I think that impeachment is a huge distraction from this very important issue that's going on in the Middle East. And I think we should get about that trial and put it behind us. I hope that Nancy Pelosi will transmit the articles over there. Remember that the language of the resolution that they passed, the single party impeachment that they passed through the House, said that it had to be exhibited in the Senate. It's not an if or proposition. It says it in the document that they drafted that they're going to exhibit it. So I think it's time to do that. You
would like the trial to start. Final question then would be, as you know, a recent Washington Post, ABC poll showed that actually about 2 in 3 Republican voters want the president to allow his aides to testify. And I wonder if you're among the 64% of Republicans in this country who want to hear in a Senate trial from Mick Mulvaney, from John Bolton, from Duffy, from Robert Blair. Are you among them? Do you want to hear from those witnesses?
I don't have any problem with that. I don't think the White House does either. There's nothing to hide here. They have an ironclad case and they're ready to try it. And look, I think the sooner we get to that, the better. I do think that we should follow.
I'm sorry, I got cut. What did you say? You don't think the White House has an issue with it? The White House is blocking this.
No, they're not blocking the witnesses at a Senate trial. That hasn't come up yet because it hasn't been decided. What Leader McConnell has said is
they have blocked them throughout the House investigation. So But you do want to hear from them in a Senate trial? Is that what you're saying?
Poppy, we can talk about why the White House has not turned them over in the House proceeding. It was a sham, and I can go through all the details of that. You don't want to belabor the point tonight, I know. What I'm suggesting is that Leader McConnell is right to say that we should follow the only real precedent that exists in the modern era, and that's the Clinton impeachment trial, which Senator Schumer voted for, those rules, which says that you decide which witnesses to hear after the first 2 stages of the trial. Each side puts on their cases. The senators get to ask questions through the Chief Justice who presides over the trial, and then you determine what, if any, witnesses are needed and under what circumstances. That's the only procedure, the only precedent that exists, and that's the one that ought to be followed. I think it's very reasonable for Leader McConnell to take that position.
We'll see what happens. Everyone's going to be back on Tuesday. Mike Johnson, Congressman, thank you for being here. We'll be right back.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
You got it.